Very Victorian, picking a fight too. We love picking fights down in Victoria. I don't know about you, Todd, up in you Sydney siders. I know you like to keep everyone happy, but this is a very Victorian thing. Albo's obviously going, yeah, that Daniel Andrews, he knew what he was doing. I'm going to pick a fight with a whole group of people.
I don't know if that's some sort of New South Wales Victorian state bait that I'm meant to be taking or something.
Todd's like, no comment.
No comment. It's very New South Wales response. Yeah, if you say so.
The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people and organisations who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in your world in 2026, then hit us up at dunstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members. If you want to join those wonderful supporters of our podcast and financially support our show so we can continue to produce great episodes every week, then we encourage you to click on the link in the show notes and subscribe to join the Patreon community of Socially Democratic. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. For over a century, Maurice Blackburn has stood up for fairness, championing the rights of everyday Australians and shaping landmark legal reforms. Today, they're harnessing new technologies to make justice more accessible, more efficient, and more responsive to the needs of modern Australia. All right, let's get on with today's episode. Okay, we are taping this one on a Tuesday evening on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and it is the start of the month. And that means it's time for our mailbag episode. We ask our wonderful listeners and financial supporters of Socially Democratic on Patreon to send through topics, questions, thoughts, and then I get to really talented campaigners from the wonderful Labor movement to come on the show and answer them. Because if I tried to answer them, it would be terrible. So I'm subcontracting it to far smarter people than I. And let me introduce those two people. She's a managing partner at Foster, Macrone, Ratcliff and Sims Advisory, and she's former chief of staff to Premier Daniel Andrews. Lissie Ratcliff, welcome back to the show. Good to see you.
Hey, Stephen. Good to be here.
And he is the Director for Campaigns and Strategy at Unions New South Wales and a very active person within the New South Wales branch of the Australian Labor Party. Todd, why'd you laugh? Todd Pickerton, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Stephen. Where else would I want to be? Amazing.
Wonderful. So we've got a bunch of, we've got 4 or 5 questions to get through today, so let's dive straight into them. The first one is more of a reflection than a question, but I guess I'll try and put it into a question as well. But Adrian from New South Wales has begun by saying, on one hand, straight into it, Adrian, I love it. On one hand, you've got strong support for things like stronger workplace protections, affordable housing, cost of living relief. But on the other, we're still operating within policy frameworks that lean heavily on market solutions, wage restraint, and productivity narratives that don't always translate into better living standards. He says workers aren't just frustrated about pay, they're also questioning fairness, whether it's wage underpayments, insecure work, or growing expectations to do more with less as a sense that the system isn't working for them, which is something that John Armitage, when he was on the show a couple of weeks ago, really did talk a lot about. And Adrian says the recent sort of campaign narrative in terms of social media content coming out from the Labor Party and the Albanese government is outlining that the government's policy changes are a step in the right direction, building the narrative to show what Labor has done in government for all Australians. So I guess what Adrian's talking about is this sort of tension about Labor's delivering concrete wins on wages and industrial relations and cost of living, and these commercials or these social media content is trying to tell that story. But workers are also asking this bigger question about fairness and whether the underlying framework of productivity and market solutions are actually delivering the living standards that people expect. So I guess what I'm asking you, Todd, first of all, is the job now to bank these wins and communicate them better, or does Labor need a deeper narrative shift about what the economy is for and when it comes to voters and in particular workers?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I guess this will be uncontroversial answer. The answer is probably doing both, right? So it's banking what we've got, communicating it better, but also the part of the communicating better is that sort of, I think, making up for what I sometimes see as a bit of like a rhetoric deficit between how the government communicates the really sizable, concrete things that it is doing to improve the lives of everyday people and meeting people in the moment of where they are. And like Adrian's hit the nail on the head with respect to how people are feeling right now. Like we're all talking about, like everyone in the political circles is like, it is, nothing's more in fashion or in vogue right now than talking about the sort of disaffected nature of working class voters, the sense that the system is rigged, that fairness has abandoned them. It's one of the reasons why we're seeing the sort of surge in support on One Nation on the right-hand side and the sort of right-wing populism. Interestingly, I know there's a bit of debate about the degree to which there's a left-wing populism wave coming and whether a party is there to pick that up, because the Greens don't seem to be positioned or seem to have had very limited success in picking up that sense of it. But it's that disaffected nature, that sort of how people feel about the way that the system in which they operate, the way they feel about the economy, and the way that the decision makers of the day, the politicians of the day, the way that they engage in policy making and the way they talk about engagement. There's a quote that I always do a terrible job of paraphrasing, which I think is Maya Angelou, but it's like, people will always forget what you said. They'll always forget the things you do, but they will always remember the things of how you made them feel. And that is such, I think, sort of core to the way the government, just this rhetoric deficit of, they have great things to show. They have really good announcement, but just this ability to communicate them in a way that speaks to how people feel right now. The only tip I'd give for those that are interested in seeing, like, how can this be done right? I've been mass consuming like Ed Husick's social media of late. He's freely recently liberated from the front bench, and I don't know if people have a chance to check out the sort of stuff that he's been putting out, but he's been sort of trying to communicate the government's wins, but also at times its shortcomings in a positive way and an authentic way with the Labor base. Like, he's been doing a lot of campaigning lately around the gas export tax, and obviously there's recent reporting that we might not see that in the budget next week. But Ed's been sort of pushing the sort of, it's a not now, not never. There's a way, and in a way that I would love to see more from members of the government and from the backbench agitating for policies, but doing it in a way that isn't, like, it's not costing us any votes by having an open dialogue or open debate about the things that we'd want to see from the government. Like, you can have that debate in a way that isn't attacking the primary or leaking or any of that sort of stuff that we've seen in the past when internal party disputes occur. Ed's been really clear about there's an ambitious policy agenda he'd like to see. He wants to connect it with everyday people, and he's doing it in a really respectful, easy way online. So I guess that's a roundabout way of me saying to Adrian, like, I totally agree. The government needs a better narrative or a better story to tell when it comes to these policies. And some of that is going to be about grappling with the fact that the old rhetoric about productivity and that the market always delivers and, public-private partnerships, all of that stuff, people don't have a sense or a lived experience that stuff has been working in the past. And so some new things are going to have to be tried.
Lissie, interesting. I mean, I agree with a lot of Todd's reflections there. What's your perspective on this? Is it just a communication problem? Like, are the government doing enough? And if folks just knew what they were doing, then people would feel a lot more comfortable about their place in the world? Or is it something a bit more substantial and that people are feeling disconnected and that the government isn't doing enough and they're not listening to what they're going through? Like, how do you assess what's happening right now?
So I don't think there's any government anywhere that I've seen right now who's able to make people feel good about how the world is right now. Like, there's just too much change, there's too much uncertainty, there's too much chaos. So I don't think it's possible. I don't know that it's possible for any government to completely get their arms around that. However, I do think that I think the federal government has become much more active of late than it maybe has been previously, and I think that's a really good thing. It's tackling some big, hard issues, and I think we'll talk about a couple of those a little bit later on too. But the thing that it has to do in amongst grabbing all those big, hard things is to Todd's point, is to tell a story about that, and the storytelling is where the connection comes from, and that's the bit that will determine whether people feel like the government understands them and is on their side. I genuinely don't think that the majority of people expect politicians or governments to solve every single problem and to make life easy and make things perfect. But I think there is that human connection bit, which can only be done through storytelling. There is no other way to make that emotional kind of resonance with people. That's the bit where I think sometimes there's still an inconsistency, and I think it depends which senior minister you're seeing out talking on any given day, which part of the story they're telling. And I think weaving it together in that narrative it's something that's much easier to do during campaigns because you get complete message control. So during election campaigns, you see a lot more of that. I think it's harder to do it in government. And I think the federal government's done a lot around cost of living. They're obviously dealing with the impacts of the war in Iran. And the kind of water supply shocks around fuel, and that's exacerbating cost of living. We're recording this a matter of hours after Reserve Bank's just jacked up interest rates again. Like, there's a lot going on, but I think I think more consistency in storytelling would be helpful to have more people feel like the government understands them. And two, I think all the things they're doing in this space are good. I think they are starting to push more into system change rather than system manage, which is more of where I think they've been maybe in their first term. But I think more system change is definitely going to be needed if they want to keep pace with how the electorate is feeling and how people are feeling in general.
Todd, on that question of storytelling that Lissie just talked about, often these stories are best conveyed not by a politician in a power suit, but by actual workers. And with your unions in New South Wales hat on, one of the things that I thought was very impactful in the 2023 New South Wales campaign, was it 23? It was 23. Yeah, it was. 23. You guys lean heavily into the stories of working people in certain industries in New South Wales that were impacted by the then coalition government. But also you can tell a good story as well. Is there a good connection from the political wing to the industrial wing, even in times of government, where we can say, look, we've together, hand in hand, we've tried to do a bunch of things that is actually going to impact your members and more broadly workers in those particular industries. But the payoff is as well as when we get up there and want to tell these stories, it would be better if it comes from workers and union members than it does come from the minister for whatever. Are we good at that, or can we be better? Well, I mean, how do you see us play that role?
Oh, I think we can always be better in it, right? Like the skill set of communications can always be refined better. I don't think anyone there'd be few in the movement who would say they're giving themselves a 10 out of 10 all the time. But you've hit on the point of the medium is often the message, and medium's a sort of broad word for how you communicate the story, right? But hearing directly from healthcare workers about the benefits of the government's improvements on Medicare, right, is very, very impactful. Hearing personal stories, often in the case with MPs, where they have a personal connection to the resolution of the policy, talking about the things that they have heard firsthand from constituents or family members or loved ones, just adding that emotion and authenticity. And you do see glimmers of it all the time in the government. Like, there are some incredible storytellers, and the PM has often delved into this and done a really good job. Like you can recall moments from the last campaign and the one before. I mean, it was with the one before where he held up the dollar coin to illustrate the backing of the increase on the minimum wage, like these powerful moments that can really tell stories that people resonate. That's why I just go back to the thing. It's about how you make people feel. It's how we sort of dress up the story and we present it in the story that we tell. We can always do a better job. And the government, and I think Adrian's made this point in the question, right? Like, the government is moving towards that. And I give them full credit for the last year or so, or hell, even the last 6 months, has been very, very rocky for any political leader to try to chart a course or to hold the frame for a period of time. Like, every day we're waking up to some new development. What's happening right now in another part of the world, it's having impacts right across the economy everywhere. No government's going to be able to have complete message discipline, but you can see the government, I think, has got back on focus and is now starting to communicate it really much more effectively. I think they've lined up and framed the budget really well. What will be interesting is, to your point, Stephen, who are the voices that they're going to champion? What are the stories they're going to tell after the budget when they're selling the things they've made up their mind, rather than right now where they're just sort of laying the groundwork?
I think maybe on the federal budget point, it's interesting, Todd. I agree. I think that the government's done a lot of. So there's something the federal government's historically very good at is front running policy agenda stuff through the media. They're very good at sort of testing the water on things, seeing, like throwing up a whole lot of balloons and seeing which way they sort of want to steer things. I do, maybe to your point earlier, I do wonder whether there couldn't be a bit more front running from an authorised sort of sense from the backbench, saying, we've seen some of this in Victoria recently where a whole bunch of MPs were campaigning on bus routes for the last few months. Funnily enough, those bus routes have all been funded today in the state budget. But things like that where you can help, give some of your backbenchers and others, just say, go out and, like the gas tax, for instance, like I agree with you. I feel like that's a not now, not never. There's a huge swell of support for that. So is that something where they can give, maybe it's Ed, maybe it's others, but more of a license to say, yeah, go out and talk about this. Go out and talk about why this is a good thing, and the cabinet will hold its position of like that's not what we're doing right now because we're off doing deals with the Singaporean government and other people and Japan and others. But you're helping kind of hold that space in the community and with our people, and saying like keep that debate alive, but keep it on our terms.
I totally agree. Like activists and activities, right? You've got to give people things to do. Otherwise, what are they going to say to voters? So I think there is a greater space. And I really wanted to highlight Ed because I do think he's tried to find a way to push the government on a progressive piece, to be authentic to himself and his community, but also do it in a respectful way. Like I don't think anyone's saying he's he's trashing anything the government's doing by just calling for some progressive reforms that are pretty widely supported. But yeah, they should be lining up lots of backbenchers. And some of them, there are some really good ones. I'd also point to someone like Jerome Laxdale, the member for Bennelong, who's done a lot of campaigning around issues and has spoken on things that, funny enough, the government gets around to doing because he can smell the way the wind's going and he's trying to build a constituency and build support for it.
Otherwise it's the Greens and the Teals. They're the ones in the space. They make all the noise. If we end up doing the thing that we've probably always going to end up doing, then they start claiming credit rather than our people do the big
absolutely. Like authenticity is the currency of the modern era in terms of communications. And so what's more authentic than I'll call for it when it's not the position so I can back it when it is? So there's definitely some space in that, I think.
All right, next question. This one's from CB Paul. I think it's Canberra Paul. Regular listener, sometimes mailbag questioner. He asks, if the Treasury adopts getting rid of negative gearing and capital gains benefits currently legislated, will it help the younger generation actually get into the market and make them feel like the system is not stacked against them? Will it over time make prices any better for them? Lissie, what are your thoughts on this?
So I reckon the answer to Paul's question is yes, over time, not overnight, and not by itself. So we need governments, state and federal, to keep pulling levers on the supply side as well, which they've been doing, and we need more of that. But in short form, yes, I think this will help. When we've talked on the pod before about largely federal tax settings that have turned housing into an asset class for generate like a couple of generations of people really, and the people who are completely locked out of that are younger people and first home buyers for the most part. So and we talked before about the government front running its budget stuff, and there's been a lot of front running of both capital gains tax discount changes and negative gearing changes. So let's assume that some version of both of those things is happening next week. But if the government does press go on that, and if they can get all of those changes through the Senate, then I think that will go some way to rebalancing those things, and so making it less attractive, to be blunt, for people to buy up housing as an investment properties, and that by definition should mean that more of it is available to owner-occupiers, many of whom will be first-home buyers, to get instead. And less competition, more supply will, over time, hopefully, without too much assistance from the RBA, mean lower prices. So it's not going to be a silver bullet. There isn't one, but it's a really important step. And if the government does bite down on both of those, then I think it should be genuinely applauded for taking some pretty serious and ambitious action. I think there's been some chatter from certain commentators about it's not tax reform. Well, I don't agree with that. It absolutely is tax reform, and it's sorely needed, and has been sitting this way since John Howard was Prime Minister, which is too long.
We're keen to get both your reflections, but I'll go to you first, Lissie, and then Todd. I think maybe the last time we were on the show, we were talking about this capital. I think we spent a bit of time actually talking about this capital gains discounts and whether or not this would happen. Then the negative gearing part came into the conversation as well since then. Are we surprised by that? Because I kind of thought that one they definitely wouldn't touch. I just thought that it was... It's not the third rail of Australian politics. I think the climate was there for a while, but geez, tell you what, it kind of took over, didn't it? It became the third rail there for a little bit.
It has been since 2019, I think.
Yeah. So I just thought, oh, wow, we don't know what's happening. It's still, the budget's still to be handed down next week. Going to do a show with Adam Triggs and Emma Dawson next week. Just to let you all know that, bit of a plug.
Great actual policy people who can explain this.
Oh, I know. I'm going to be so out of my depth again. That's why I'll get those two on. I'll just text them the questions and I'll go and make myself a drink and come back in an hour. I hope you had a good chat. But I mean, Lissie, if it's true, are you surprised that they've gone as far as negative gearing as well?
Yeah, honestly, a little bit, pleasantly surprised. But I think, and this is sort of what I was alluding to earlier in the episode, but it feels a bit like the government's now decided, for whatever constellation of reasons, if we're going to do something, we're going to do it properly. So take the NDIS, for instance. They had a whole spectrum of options that they could have taken on that. They could have done, kind of partial reform, and that probably would have been easier, and it wouldn't have tackled the whole kind of, massive cost overrun problem that we've got. But instead, Mark Butler, obviously with backing of the Prime Minister and Treasurer and others, has kind of just grabbed the whole thing and said, no, we're doing this and we're doing it properly. And so it looks, again, the way they're front running it in public at the moment, looks like they're going to do housing tax reform. They're going to do it properly. So we're doing the whole thing. And I think it's interesting that, as you say, Stephen, it's been the third rail in Australian politics for, what is it now, going on 7 years. Sometimes policy ideas have their moment. And, 2019, when Bill Shorten was putting up a big agenda of lots of things, including, two things that sound pretty similar to what the government's contemplating for next week in the budget. And it was, I think we can probably assess it was too early for those ideas. There wasn't the social licence in the community for them at that time. Housing was expensive back then, but we didn't, everybody hadn't agreed, universally we're in a housing crisis. But everybody does now universally agree that we're in a housing crisis, and there is serious demand from everybody for genuine action to be taken to do something about that. And if Jim Chalmers and Anthony Albanese are going to say, we're up for that challenge, this is our time, and maybe the time for those two policy ideas, negative gearing and capital gains tax changes, maybe the time for those two things is 2026, and we're doing it.
Todd, did it surprise you? But can I frame it in a different way and say, do you think that they sat around the cabinet table and were like, shit, it's a year since we won an absolute truckload of seats. It's like we just won a Ferrari in the lottery. Why are we not taking this out for a spin? Let's take the Ferrari out for a spin. Let's get down those open roads and
see what we can do.
Open it up. Let's see what this car can really do. It's a red one, so we know it's going to go fast.
Yeah, we can leave Angus in the dust. I don't know if they just woke up one morning and said, let's have a crack. My sense, not privy to any of the conversations internally about how this comes about, but my sense is that particularly the Prime Minister and particularly the Treasurer have a sort of deep strategic think about how they're going to pursue big changes, and full marks for the ability that they have slowly softened the ground on this. If it happens next Tuesday, it will not be a surprise to anyone, but it'll still be a great delight to many. They have found a way to really, the scare campaign has not run in the last couple of weeks. There has not been some building momentum against it because they know that the time is now. They know that there's the ever-growing cohort of voters, and particularly young people, who see this as a fundamental test about a government that will stand up for them. This goes exactly to the previous question, right, about the narrative that this government wants to tell about the economy and then whose corner they are in. I am just like Lissie, very, 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 very pleased by it. I'm a little surprised to see negative gearing in the mix after what I thought it was out and they were going to go after capital gains. But from an economic perspective, you've got to remember just how important the interaction of those two pieces of tax are with each other. One of the reasons that negative gearing works in such a sort of in a way to drive up prices is because capital gains allows them not to be taxed on it. The interaction of the two terms, there's a lot of analysis about the changes that Howard made to capital gains tax and what turbocharged the sort of inequality efforts that were already in place with negative gearing. So I think from an economic perspective, the government's absolutely landed it. I think the full marks for telegraphing this in such a big way that and also, I think credit for them landing this all while the three conservative far-right parties that we have on the other side are all busy killing each other, and Farrer are too busy to be paying any attention to what's coming in the budget next week.
Yeah, I don't want to, let's not get ahead of ourselves. It may not happen, but if it does happen, though, you can just imagine a couple of things that will fall out of this. The reaction by our base will be incredibly, overwhelmingly popular. And then they will tell so many other people, and it will bleed into the wider society, in which then just regular punters that aren't paying attention to politics will go, oh, shit, this is actually pretty good. Good to see a government that's actually listening to us and creating some changes, particularly amongst that younger cohort of voters. But it will also tick the other box that we like in political campaign communication. So there's going to be groups going to be pissed off about it, because they're not even grandfathering it. They're just saying, that's it. We're done. We're done with that. And there's going to be a cohort of voters that are negative gearing. They're going to be shitty about it. And out of that group, I don't know how many of them are voting for us, but I would imagine not that many. But the overwhelming return in terms of voter support will far outweigh that. And I would be absolutely surprised if we don't get a bump in our primary vote in research post the budget, and a substantial one, and one that lasts a little bit longer as well. If we play our cards right, this is going to be a seminal moment for this government in this term.
Well, and partly because they don't agree with it, but partly it's a conviction thing, right? It's as you say, they're picking a fight, and so there is communications value and political value in conflict, but that is maximised if you've picked something and said, we stand here, we make this choice. And in this case, if these changes are what's in the budget next week, then everyone in the Australian Labor Party will be able to, look at everybody in this country, under the age of, pick your number, 40, 35, 30, whatever, and say, we choose you. We have made a decision to choose you. And back where we started the conversation on this episode, what are people looking for? It's the feeling, and the feeling that if Labor is choosing them, then that makes it easier for them in turn to choose Labor. And I think the government will do itself a great service next week if it's got this kind of agenda to offer people, because it's also saying we are not afraid, we've got a mandate. We've got an agenda. We know where we want to take the country, and this is what it looks like. Come with us.
Very Victorian, picking a fight too. We love picking fights down in Victoria. I don't know about you, Todd, up in you Sydney siders. I know you like to keep everyone happy, but this is a very Victorian thing. Albo's obviously going, that Daniel Andrews, he knew what he was doing. I'm going to pick a fight with a whole group of people.
I don't know if that's some sort of New South Wales Victorian state bait that I'm meant to be taking or something.
Sounds like no comment.
No comment. It's very New South Wales response. Yeah, if you say so. That would be a Victorian. That would be a very Victorian thing to say. Yeah.
Absolutely, it is a very Victorian thing to say. Absolutely, trying to pick a fight. Trying to pick a fight with you.
Yeah, you can do it all you like.
It has completely run over. Like the feds have completely run over the opposition lately. They are just nowhere. Like the government has been running the agenda comprehensively, and I think it's more of that, right? But the opposition doesn't seem to know which way's up right now.
I love it. We'll talk more a bit about what's going on in Farah, where they're currently all decamped in a moment. But we've got another question to go to. This is from Nathan. And Nathan says, some listeners have already brought up the notion of the future made Australia. Hang on, let me read that again, Stephen. Some listeners have already brought up the notion that future made Australia is a plan to make us Saudi Arabia 2.0 via selling hydrogen and renewable energy power materials. However, outside of two pro-Labor YouTubers, I don't know who they are, I never heard anyone else articulate this. Even, and he said Jesse McCrone in the first mailbag, but actually I think he might have been you, Lissie. I don't know if you have ever been confused before.
Now and then.
Was asked this question, and I'd say she wasn't particularly enthusiastic about it. Is that right? Were you not particularly enthusiastic about it?
I have no idea, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't remember the discussion. I remember we talked about it roughly, but I don't think I've ever been anti-future made in Australia.
Well, Nathan finally asks, so what's the truth? Is federal Labor seriously gunning for us to become a energy-creating superpower, or am I being sold a fantasy? And maybe, Lissie, I'll go to you. Lissie or Jesse, whoever wants to answer this question.
Whichever one of us. So I don't know if we're going to become Saudi Arabia 2.0, so I cannot forecast that part of our future. But I will say, Nathan, I think on this one, my take on Future Made in Australia is that it is really about, so Australia's got a lot of natural resources, many more than many places on the earth. And for a long time, we've, through different eras, we've basically dug them up and sent them offshore for other people to process them and then make them into stuff, at which point we then buy them back at a much higher price generally. I think the attempt for Future Made in Australia is really to bring more parts of that supply chain and get them moving in Australia, and therefore create jobs here so that we can process more things here, but also keep more of the value here. So I think that, it is industry policy at scale, and I think industry policy, when it's being done well, means you've got to take bets on more than one thing at a time. Like you've got to say, we're going to try these 5, 10 things, whatever it is, and there is an element of risk in that, and some of them, one or two of them may not actually in the end come off, but the others will. And so I think that's what the government's doing. Is green hydrogen specifically the answer? We'll see. Maybe not, but they've picked a whole lot of other parts of that. Critical minerals, I think, is a really sensible thing for us to be in this country, given we've got so much of it under the ground, and anything that can align with the energy transition that we know we need to keep going through, and that can align with, I think, a particularly topical thing at the moment is manufacturing and all kinds of other sovereignty, given we're currently experiencing how unfortunate it is that most of our fuel is processed offshore and then has to be shipped back to us. I think anything in that sovereignty space right now is politically sensible and also politically popular. So I think, again, this is a sort of policy agenda that the government's now a couple of years into. But I think it'll probably really come into its own in the next couple of years.
I completely agree with Lissie in this. I just think, the old adage, right, good policy is often really good politics. And I think right now where Future Made in Australia is meeting Australians in that sort of sense of economic sovereignty. I also just think that anything that combines good blue-collar jobs with well-resourced green energy is just a golden area for the government and one that sends the Tories mad and really wedges them. I just think that's a brilliant thing. More power to the future made in Australia. Obviously, the devil's in the detail, and we'll see more. But I just think it's very skillfully done.
Bravo! Thank you, Nathan, for your question. Let's last question, and then we'll sort of myself and my two guests will just start freewheeling ourselves. This one's from Well Done Angus. That's the name of our Patreon subscriber who only joined recently, but is very prolific in punching in questions for the Feeney Files and for this one. I actually genuinely love this question. Well Done Angus says, my question is, how are non-political outsiders recruited, chosen and integrated into the party to become a member of parliament? People like Dan Repicoli. Is it Repicoli?
Repicoli.
Yeah, Repicoli. And Michelle Ananda Raja. I assume it's a Labor apparatchik in a trench coat late at night stepping out of the shadows and asking them, do you want real power?
It like opens the trench coat. Here's some nomination forms.
Exactly. Great question. Well done, Angus, for that question. Thank you so much.
Question of the year.
Terrific move. Well done, Angus.
I've got thoughts on this. Do you guys want to go first, or do you want me to go first on my thoughts on this?
Well, Stephen, you're a former party official. Let's ask you, how did you recruit candidates? What's the process? How do you find your stars?
How did you offer them real power?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what kind of trench coat was it? Was it Burberry? Was it good? What did you look? What was it like?
I had a Country Road trench coat, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Assigned.
What is it like standing someone out to run?
I'll be asking the questions on this podcast, not you. Okay, I've thought it into 4 categories.
Yeah.
Now, I may have missed some, so I'm keen for you guys to think about. Maybe I've overlooked a couple. Category 1 of how you can become a member of parliament is what I call the branch stalwart. But there's a subcategory within that. But the branch stalwart has gone out and, attended every branch meeting for years, has been a booth captain at a local booth for state and federal election cycles, knows every branch member by name, has had cups of tea, has had a sort of leadership role within a local branch, and has earned pre-selection based on just genuine local credentials. And that's the hardest one of all. I think it's just hard work. It's a hard grind. But the subcategory is its evil twin that is known as the branch stacker that has signed up hundreds, if not in some cases thousands of members and paid for their membership. None of these people have ever been to a meeting of the Labor Party. They don't know they're in the Labor Party. And obviously it's been a problem that's dogged our various branches from time to time. And hopefully that's sort of weeded out. But that's one. There are one of 2 ways within that group that have sought pre-selection through rank and file. The second one is what I call the Stephen Connery Rolodex pre-selection, which is the party anoints you. There is national executive intervention. There's no rank and file vote. Often it's been a sort of a celebrity or high-profile recruit in a seat that has appeared all of a sudden that's up for grabs, and people have decided that one can't go to a rank and file. We need to find a high-profile candidate. Often it happens in a by-election, but not always. I think of Justin Madden, former Carlton footballer, was a Stephen Connery Rolodex selection, just plucked out of nowhere and then just put in. Sometimes it lands and goes really, really well. Like it actually does a great job. Peter Garrett, another example of what I'd call a Stephen Connery Rolodex. I'm picking on Stephen Connery because it happened a lot in Victoria, and it was always Connery that found these people. Only because Stephen just kind of knew a lot of people in that space and goes, I've got a great idea. Let's put this person in. Sometimes it landed. To be honest, sometimes it didn't. And I'll let history judge a lot of these different people. But that's another way. The third way is what I call the landslide lottery winner, or what I also want to rename the pajama candidate, and I'll give you a reason why. You've been pre-selected in an unwinnable seat that you never expected ever to pay off, but it was kind of like folks said, you just got to get in. We just need to run a Labor candidate in insert traditional Liberal blue ribbon seat. But it happens to be at an election when Labor's stocks are absolutely going through the roof, and in a landslide, you all of a sudden find that you are a member of parliament. And I call it, if I change it from landslide lottery winner to the pajama candidate, I want to rename it already because of one particular person, John Kennedy, who was the pre-selected candidate at the 2018 Victorian state election for, is it Hawthorn. And actually campaigned, like went out there, a former retired Catholic secondary school teacher, soul of the earth Labor person, did the right thing by the local branch said, we need someone to nominate. John said, I'm retired. I'll give it a go. I'll just put my name on it so Labor Party people have got someone to vote for. And obviously the 2018 campaign happened. It's a massive historic landslide to Labor. And someone from our campaign CHQ had to call John Kennedy, who was in his pajamas, tucked in bed on election night after watching the results come in and go, oh, Labor's won this in a canter. I'm now going to retire and go to bed. The phone rings and someone says, it's so-and-so from CHQ. John, you've just been elected to Parliament as the member for Hawthorn. What are you doing right now? And he's like, I'm in bed. I'm done for the night. And he's like, well, we kind of need you to get out of your pajamas and, get ready to do some media. So there's the landslide lottery winner, AKA the pajama candidate. The last one is what I call the witness protection program candidate. So either a union secretary that the union wants gone gets relocated normally into a safe upper house seat. So the union's problem is solved by getting rid of a dud union secretary that's probably driven their membership into the ground. And the Labor caucus inherits someone that wasn't good enough to lead the union, but apparently is good enough to legislate. And so that's the other candidate. So between the four of them, that's kind of, I think, how most people find themselves in Parliament. Now, that may be a little bit controversial, but I'm not running for Parliament, so it doesn't really matter. I don't need to get those votes. But thoughts, reflections? Does anyone want to touch this with a barge pole, or are you like, Stephen, I can't believe you just said that on a podcast?
Well, Stephen, I'm not unconvinced that you are well done, Angus, based off how well prepared your response to this question is. Are you planning your own? Can the real well done, Angus, come forward? My only reflection would be you've missed the people who do work in the party for a long time, who are union officials or campaigners who go and contest a pre-selection. And sometimes it's not just your category one, but it's someone who's both done the hard yards in the constituency of election, but also has worked within the sort of the movement or sort of the institutional power. The only other point is your pajama candidates. I know there's a lot of people sort of decry those candidates who kind of accidentally end up in Parliament, but I've yet to hear of one that actually wasn't also one of the hardest working candidates you've ever heard. Often it's that person who goes, I'll put my hand up, I know it's unwinnable. As far as I know, it's unwinnable, but I'm still going to put in a showing because it's what the party deserves. So I'm going to go door knock every single home. And those people ride the wave because they're there and they've got the board in the water already. I rarely do you hear about an accidental candidate who also is I was on holiday on the day or something. They're usually really hardworking people. And they sometimes, you can get you never know you're lucky in the big city, and they can get lucky again.
And then they have to work out how to quit their job or shut down their small business because they now have to go
no, what have I done? They just go and hustle those 3 or 4 years, door knocking, talking to constituents.
Yeah. Lissie, anything to add, or do we cover all bases there?
Yeah. I think there's probably category 5 and 6 that Todd sort of just alluded to, but I think I'm sure there's a left version of Stephen Conroy Rolodex as well. I know you didn't nominate that one.
Without a doubt. Oh yeah, that was certainly not to imply that it was just a domain of the right. That was Stephen's just representing everyone in the party broadly across our groups. I'm sure he's happy to speak for everybody. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Sounds like the complaint is he knows a lot of people, which seems like the sort of thing we'd want, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and Justin Madden ended up being a cabinet minister. So, there's...
Oh, yeah, don't interpret what I just said as a bad thing.
You put Justin in the category of the good ones. Because
I do think the thing that well done, Angus, has also made the point of, like, how do these people get found? And often it's sitting MPs who, through their day-to-day work, are engaged in lots of areas and hear about people who hold Labor values, maybe haven't been a member before, but have done a substantive achievement, either in maybe in the case here sport, but also particularly in health. There's a lot of doctors who maybe have been party members but not really active in the party because they've been out saving people's lives, and when opportunity comes up, they're great candidates.
Yeah.
And often they've got a really good reason. I mean, one that I know of is Mike Freelander, the member for Macarthur, who had been involved in the party a little bit, but had just been the local doctor who delivered half the electorate and was just a salt of the earth store to the community. And when the opportunity came up to run, he said, yeah, I'm prepared to do that. And he's turned what was a pretty liberal area into a reasonably safe Labor seat just through his own hard work.
And to build on that, I think one of the success stories of Labor at a state and a national level over the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years has been our attention in pre-selecting good quality candidates. And I don't know whether victory has 1,000 fathers, so every time we win elections, that's what we just say. That the candidates were so great, and then maybe we need to go through a cycle where we get belted for a while, then all of a sudden we start saying the candidates are shit. But since I've been doing this podcast, when we did post-election analysis of WA, South Australia, New South Wales, Victoria, and the federal campaign, there was always someone on the show said the quality of the candidates that we are selecting now are far better than they were 3 or 4 cycles ago when we were losing elections. Greta Carnes, who was on the pod a couple of weeks ago, we were talking after the show, and one of the things she said to me, because we were talking about the Harris campaign and where it kind of fell down, and she said, look, there's a truism in Western liberal democracies that really hasn't changed. It's strong message first, good candidate that communicates that second, and then the campaign takes care of the rest of it, like the campaign apparatchik, all the work that you're doing. You don't have a good message, you don't have a good candidate, and she was talking more sort of top of the ticket. But I think it still applies at a local level as well. And David Feeney actually had said maybe last year or the year before that his view, and I wonder if it's changed actually, but his view was that we are still fluking selecting good quality candidates. And he said the only structural change that Labor actually has intentionally done that has meant that we are selecting better candidates is affirmative action. He said otherwise everything else we're kind of fluking finding good candidates. There's nothing structurally that actually is bringing in good candidates. Now, that could be contentious. I should ask David to revisit that thought. But at the time, it kind of made sense to me because I kind of felt like that as a party official. We were often fluking good candidates, and the only times that we were finding good quality candidates was because affirmative action was forcing us to not select blokes and actually having to go and source high-quality women. And I guess the next step for us is then to go beyond that. It's not just women, but it's also other forms of diversity of which you can cut it in so many different ways. And how do we structurally build that into the way the way the party operates is probably a big challenge for it. The next mountain we need to climb, essentially.
Yeah, and I think there's obviously the quotas within quotas debate that people have sometimes, but I think there's also, to your point before, about some people get found by like someone else in the party, whether that's an MP or a party official or whoever it might be. But as we sort of win, this is definitely true in Victoria, and I think this would be true of the last federal election as well. But as we win more and more seats in these like big landslide victories, we inevitably in that we also expand where the party is more active. And that brings both through a combination of, the different people that we may have, like good people beget other good people, right? So you expand the party's network with these new people that we've pre-selected and who've been elected to Parliament, and then they in turn, bring new contacts in. But it's also about like what's the policy agenda and what is it that people want to associate themselves with, particularly when you're already in government. So I think if you're seeking to, take government from opposition, it's a bit of a different thing. Like sometimes you're going to get people joining for maybe different sorts of reasons. But in both, certainly in the federal case and in most states around the country right now which have Labor governments, like there's a bit of a momentum thing. Like, and if Labor governments can offer, serious policy agendas that people want to get around and want to be a part of, so the conversation we're having about what will be in the budget next week, that is going to both interest and excite a whole bunch of different people who say, well, maybe I want to join that. Maybe I want to run for Parliament and, represent my community and be part of the team that's doing that kind of work. Like I think momentum's a real factor in those things.
Yeah. I have one other reflection actually, which maybe I was at Mass on the weekend and the priest in the homily was talking about ministry and about the early church and how it was set up. So there's the apostles. Jesus has died and gone to heaven. And the apostles are working out how do we spread this church? How do we spread this, the teachings of Christ? And they were like, do we just go out and tell them what we want to do, or do we actually recruit people to serve in a ministry to serve the challenges that the community are facing right now? And so there was a decision about, are we only going to have Jews to be a part of our ministry, or are we going to extend it? And they were saying, no, there are challenges amongst people who speak Greek, people who speak Hebrew, all these kind of things. And so they said we need to diversify who was going to serve in the ministry, because it's those that will serve that ministry that will then administer to the community that are facing these problems. So I'm wondering then, in leadership, are we selecting people based on what we want them to do, or are we selecting people to go minister to the community to serve the problems that they are facing? Because in organising, when we find leadership teams, we don't write down Todd's a leader, Lissie's a leader, Stephen's a leader. We write down what are the roles that are needed right now, what is the responsibility of those roles, and who would be best served to fill that role. And then people self-select. And I'm wondering, in terms of selecting leadership for folks that go into our party, should we start to look at what are the problems that are constituencies are facing right now? So therefore, what is needed in this moment? And then who are the kind of candidates that could go and fulfill that quote unquote ministry? I don't know, Todd, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a pretty accurate description of the process by which candidates are selection. Like, I mean, I've talked to pre-selecting members of branches and stuff, and front of their mind is who is going to do a good job of representing this community, like who can speak to the problems of this community, who can, it's not I know. It's not always just I know this person and they've been my friend. We've had lots of cups of tea, so I'm going to vote for them. I mean, sometimes there is a bit of that, but I've met lots of pre-electors over the years. In when I've helped out with ballot or been a branch member myself, where the consideration is who's going to do a good job of representing this community, this constituency, who's going to be able to speak to our lived experience in the parliament, who's going to be the best advocate, not just in the parliament, but also within the sort of parliamentary Labor Party for my community and my thing. And I do think that is front of mind, and not just for the pre-selectors, it's often for the party administration. I know that it weighs heavy on the minds of general secretaries and other party officials about the candidates that we get. Sometimes they're 50% of the challenge in terms of us winning the seat, is the faith we're going to place in this person being a hard worker, a good communicator with a story that we can tell people. I think that is a really good description, Stephen, about how sometimes that thinking is, because I think people from the outside just assume that it's a bit like, from central casting, like there's a big long list of people and we just sort of pluck out people who've been waiting, when sometimes it is very strategic.
Well done, Angus. Good question. Okay, before we wrap up, a couple of things I want to do. I actually want to get some reflections. We're in a bit of a wedge right now between the Nepean by-election that happened on the weekend in sort of the southern part of metropolitan Melbourne, on the bottom of the Mornington Peninsula. And this Saturday is a very similar kind of contest that is happening in the federal electorate of Farrer, which is in southern New South Wales. It's quite a long electorate that runs along the Murray River, basically going from the city of Albury all the way up through Deniliquin, but also takes in Broken Hill from memory as well. So it's a huge electorate. Similarities between the two races: one, Labor's not contesting in either; two, the opposition Liberal candidates in both state Victoria and federal parliaments are in a knife fight with One Nation and a strong independent. And I just want to get a sense from Lissie about what you took away from the results on the weekend in Victoria, and to Todd, what is happening in New South Wales with this Farrer by-election, and what are your thoughts and reflections on that? They can be. You have the right to do as many hot takes as you like, and you will not be judged whatsoever on your thoughts. And so to you, Lissie, first of all, what did you take away from, obviously, the Tories? One, I've got the results in front of me. You've got the results in front of you as well. I'll let you do a bit of a post-election analysis.
Yeah, look, well, so the Liberal candidate won, and, this has all been sort of set up as some sort of, existential threshold test for Jess Wilson as Liberal Party leader in Victoria, which if she couldn't pass this, how could she possibly, properly contest the state election, which is probably overblowing it slightly, but because by-elections aren't, as we know, determinative of general elections. However, the Liberal candidate came first but still copped a 10% swing off their primary, noting no, as you say, Stephen, no Labor candidate. One Nation came second. They came in just shy of 25%, and there was a community independent who's come third, and then there were a bunch of sort of also-rans after that, including the Greens. I think my take out of this is the first Victorian data point that we've had to really test whether the One Nation vote is real here, and it definitely, absolutely is. Like, we've seen that in South Australia at their state election, but this is, that further proof, and I'm sure we'll see something at least similar in Farrer on the weekend. But my take out of this is, like, the Liberal Party has a genuine problem, and it's not a Victorian one, it is a national problem. There is only so much of the Conservative vote to go around in any electoral contest, and right now One Nation is taking a really big chunk of it away from, well, there's no National Party candidate running in Nepean, but it'll be taken from Nats and from Libs, depending on which seat you're talking about. And I think that's going to give them a genuine problem in all kinds of places, because if they finish in the wrong order, then they're going to risk getting completely knocked out of contests in seats that they've held for generations. And where that leaves them at the end of these counts, I think is going to be really interesting to see. There's a big question in Victoria about whether the party is going to officially do a preference deal with One Nation. All signs out of party headquarters so far are yes. Jess Wilson, as the leader, has refused to rule that out, so I think we can take to the bank that it's happening. Yeah. That's going to give them a really big problem in their inner city seats, of which she occupies one in the inner eastern suburbs of Kew. I think that they're genuinely jammed. They're going to be of the view that they have to get preferences, and their party membership will be of the view that they need One Nation preferences in order to win seats. I think the getting of them in some places is going to cost them seats in other places. So I think this is I think it's a really wicked problem for them. But so we've had two. So South Australia's the first data point, Nepean's the second data point, Farrer will be the third one, but One Nation are here to play, and they're playing hard.
My takeaways from Nepean were that this, because One Nation and the Liberals were preferencing each other over the Independent. That's what I was told on Saturday night, and I actually I never saw the How to Vote, so I'm actually basing that on secondhand information. What happened in the end was the Liberals won and the Independent overtook One Nation. But I'm assuming, and I haven't seen preference flows either, but I'm assuming that in the end it was the preference flows from One Nation to the Liberals that got them over. Whereas if the preference flows had gone from One Nation to the Independent, then the Lib would have been in trouble. So in this instance, that deal has paid off for the Tories in this particular seat, whether that is the case elsewhere, and the blowback it gets from traditional Liberal voters going, I don't want to vote for a party that's playing footsies with a bunch of right-wing fascists, then I guess that's going to transpire. That we'll find that out later in the year. Looking then at Farah, I feel like we've got a stronger independent candidate. I don't know, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, Todd, I don't know what the preference arrangements are between One Nation and the Libs. But they effectively locked out the independent in Nepean, and I'm just wondering if there's a chance of the independent to get enough preferences to stay in the count to eventually go over the top of either the One Nation or independent or Liberal candidate to jag this one. What's your read on what's going on in Farah?
Yeah, there's a few forces. I think you are right in that my understanding is that the three parties, the One Nation, Nationals and the Libs, have all locked out the independent in an attempt to sort of close it out for the Conservatives. There's a bit of reporting about some, 5-degree chess going on in all of these people's headquarters that, it's better to have a Conservative party elected that's in the sort of like the mainstream of that than have an independent, rural independent elected who can bed down a victory and sort of be entrenched. You're looking at it, it's very interesting because you've got these sort of this great tension between the three parties, right, where they're all fighting to be the mainstream voice for the Conservative vote. One Nation, the Libs and the Nationals. And this is a seat that is perfectly suited for any one of them to win. Like it is Farah, as you said, it's very, very rural. It spreads a lot of distance. It's got some big towns and some big centres like Albury and places like around Broken Hill. Like it's got these constituencies that could be voting Liberal. It's held by the Liberal leader not too long ago. So there's a tension there about them all trying to kill each other and win. But at the same time, they all have to preference each other because attacking the other one or preferencing a progressive independent would be suicide with respect to their primary vote with their Conservative base. And so it's really interesting watching them all tussle. Like watching the Nationals attack ad on One Nation was definitely not on my bingo card for like 2026, but that is where we are now, watching Canavan going, Barnaby going, Angus, and all and around it goes. It's also got all the other hallmarks of a classic One Nation piece. There's a lot of questions about the One Nation candidate and their background. It seems like one of the biggest complaints that One Nation voters seem to have is that he might have at one point thought he should have joined the Labor Party or joined the National Party. It's a really fascinating, and to Lissie's point, like it is just the next big data point we're all watching. The only other thing I'd say reflection-wise is sort of out of nowhere, Get Up has kind of arrived in the middle of the by-election, and not heaps of people paying attention to this, but they've been running some really interesting ads, some really good advertising and messaging around One Nation. They've managed to raise a fair bit of money. They even had Barnaby Joyce go them on live, which apparently did wonders for their fundraising count as well. So I think that's been really interesting, watching the kind of the resurgence of sort of Get Up as a sort of really active force in holding back sort of right-wing politics and right-wing sort of being an obstacle to sort of the progressive reforms we'd like to see out of Labor governments.
I think one of the other things that will be interesting about Farah is the One Nation candidate there has had some controversy around some of the characters he's been associating with, I think, which we don't need to go through all the details of now, but I think it's going to be an interesting test to see whether voters in Farah decide that they care about that, because I think one of the things that we've seen in populist-driven kind of candidates and contests in the UK and the US is that character tests like that just aren't having the same impact that they traditionally would have in politics for the major parties. So whether that's Donald Trump at one extreme or some of the pretty unpleasant candidates that have been pre-selected for both Reform in the UK and also the Green Party in the UK as well, so on opposite ends of that populist far-right, far-left spectrum. But, people seem to be sort of just shrugging off what would have, traditionally seen people being deselected from a major party. So it'll be interesting to see whether that has any impact on Saturday, because I think one of the big open questions about One Nation in Australia coming up to the Victorian election and then, presumably the next federal election and others in between, will be can it operate at scale as a big party with all of the things that come with that, which is you've got to pre-select, to our point before about candidates. Can you get good candidates? Can you vet them? Can you hang on to them all? Can you put the kind of infrastructure around, all of them that you need to run big campaigns across, all or most seats in any given election campaign? And we don't really know the answer to that yet because we've only had South Australia so far at scale. But I think it'll be interesting to see whether people in Farrer decide they care about any of these character issues.
Yeah, I felt like in South Australia, One Nation were benefited by a small media market, very disinterested electorate in the campaign itself, and a Labor government unsure of how it wanted to hit One Nation.
Yeah.
And I think that, here's my hot take, that for the Victorian state election, a couple of things will happen. They are going to run candidates everywhere. Our dirt unit, or whatever Jesse calls it, this has got a much better name than dirt unit, will actually do it.
Empowerment unit.
Thank you. Policy Empowerment Unit.
I've heard Truth Team is the other one.
It just says Wales Truth Team. That's good. I like that.
Sometimes I've heard of the Truth Team.
Truth Team will do its homework and be ready to basically drop a bucket of shit once noms close. And also I think that connecting One Nation as a party and their candidates with the craziness of Trump or Trump-style politics is going to be a problem for them. And I'm not saying I don't think going after Pauline on her flying around the country is actually going to cut it, because I think that people will see that and go, she's just a hard-working woman who worked in a small business owner, worked in a chip shop, and now she's getting the rewards of, why wouldn't Gina Reinhart fly around? The sort of like, good on her, made, that's how Pauline made good. Now, there's a core group of voters in One Nation just aren't going to change votes, and that's not what I'm talking about. But it's ones that are thinking about it, right? And look at Trump-style politics and look at One Nation-style politics and go, nah. We don't need that kind of chaos in my life right now. Things are tough enough as it is. I don't want to be voting for those types of candidates. So I think that can help mitigate against some kind of surge. The second thing, and this is where I said this in the last episode, One Nation will end up in the count. They will be stuck on an island because there won't be enough preferences going to them from everyone else to get them over the line, except for one party, the Liberal Party. Mm-hmm. They are the ones who will elect One Nation candidates. No one else. Not us, not the Greens, not Hermione, but One Nation. And we need to hold the Liberal Party to account, saying you are opening the door to this fucking craziness into our politic, and it's your responsibility. And, and Jess Wilson, you need to answer for that, because that's what you're doing.
Well, and they need to answer for that, particularly, I think, in two areas. One, there's an obvious sort of, anti-One Nation setting in sort of more inner city electorates. But two, in electorates where there are large numbers of multicultural people living in different multicultural communities. Like, One Nation is a party that is wildly anti-immigration. A lot of the views they espouse are just flat out racist, and the Liberal Party is saying they can have our preferences, and to your point, Stephen, in some cases may well leapfrog them into Parliament off the back of them. And so every leader of the Liberal Party in this country should have to answer for that in every seat where that's going to be of relevance to people. Like those like every campaign and every Labor government should be making sure that multicultural communities know that that is the decision that the Liberal Party is taking, that they are backing racists and they are happy to see their votes go to them and they are happy to put them into Parliament, and that that's just fine with them. And if you've got a problem with that, then you should not be supporting the Liberal Party. You should be voting Labor.
Okay. Jesus, this has been a good episode. We're going to wrap it up. But I'm going to ask for one thing left before we go. I'm calling it the watch list. what are you watching right now? Or what are you doing? Or what are you reading? Or what are you looking at that's political that you want to share with our wonderful listeners? Lissie, I'll go to you first.
So this is not one that I have watched yet, but I'm going to watch. So there is a New Zealand film called Pike River, which has, I think, come out in New Zealand end of last year, but it's having its Australian premiere at Victorian Trades Hall this week, and is in, I think, select cinemas, as they say, next week. So basically, if you go to find a Palace cinema somewhere, you can probably find it. But it's about a mine that collapsed in the South Island of New Zealand in 2010. And there was subsequently a big, there was a Royal Commission and a whole lot of other inquiries afterwards. But the film is about, as I understand it, having not yet seen it, but the film is about largely the families of the miners who died and their fight to get justice and answers about what happened. The trailer looks great. It's one of those stories, I think, that probably doesn't have necessarily a lot of familiarity over on this side of the ocean. I think it's a well-known story in New Zealand. So, we can support our comrades across the sea. I encourage everybody to go and have a look at that one.
We'll put the link to the, the preview in the show notes.
Trailer.
Yeah, the trailer, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Todd Lee, what do you got?
I'm going to commit a great faux pas being a guest on a podcast by naming another podcast, if
Shame.
that's okay. I know, shame. I'm a big, it should be a surprise, no one, big Restless History podcast fan. They have just finished a 5-part series on the politics of 1970s Britain. And the first one is like the rise of Thatcher. It goes through the 1975 referendum for the common market. There's some incredible voice impersonations that they do, ranging from Thatcher through to David Bowie. I think they're doing the Sex Pistols are in the next episode. Like, it's a really interesting piece. But I think the two things I think are really interesting for listeners is, one, they really touch on the political strategy that Thatcher developed about the narrative and the storytelling that she was trying to develop both through her candidacy for the leadership and in the election. And I think, like many people, many unionists, many Labor Party people, I'm not the biggest fan of Thatcher by any record, but you got to, game respects game. Like, she was a very talented political operator and had a really clear sense of what she wanted to achieve and the methods to do it. The economy as the method was her whole mantra. I think it's a really fascinating one. I also think it's a really good reflection on, I think we are coming to the end of the last 40 years of where sort of like neoliberalism has been kind of the dominant economic story that we have told. And that regime, that paradigm has its origins in sort of 70s, 80s politics. They always said that one of Thatcher's greatest achievement was Tony Blair's New Labour, right, about grabbing hold of that rhetoric. So I just think it's a really interesting time to go back and look at the beginning of the last epoch, because I think we're about to go into another one now in terms of the way storytelling is going to be told about the economy. So I just think it's great stuff. You should check it out. And then you should come back and listen to more Socially Democratic as well.
Redemption. Good job, Todd.
Yeah. And when they do a culture share, I'm sure they're rereferencing the Mailbag as well.
I'm sure they are.
Tom Holland's all about it.
If you start doing, impersonations like Tom Holland, I think our audience can only go up.
Mate, his Thatcher is so good. It's just brilliant. I love
I'll
it.
have to check it out. Yeah, some of his are amazing, and some of them you're like, I don't know if I would have tackled that one.
Well,
brave.
Interesting you ask, Lissie, because my watch list is not something you necessarily should put on your list, but if you are a fan of Saturday Night Live, of which I am, I've seen a lot of people do Tucker Carlson impersonations on the internet, and most of them are average. But there is a rookie cast member this year by the name of Jeremy Culhane, who went on the weekend update as Tucker Carlson. And it's one of those things that maybe it's my own addictive personality, but I cannot stop watching it. It is so funny. And I've watched it so many times. Like, when it first came out, I think I watched it about 400 times. And it started to actually burn into my vocab. Like, I found myself in meetings going, that's the rule now. That's the goal. Or, what are we doing? What's going on? Anyway, very, very funny. Very, very good Tucker Carlson impersonation, which is not easy. I think impersonation, it's a skill, right? It's not easy to do, but I just thought he really kind of nailed it. And the cackle that Tucker Carlson has. Anyway, very funny, very, very funny. If you're having a shit day, just go watch it. If you don't laugh at that, then you're in a bad place because it's very funny. All right, we're done. That's a great episode. I'm very pleased with today. Covered a lot of topics. Thank you to our Patreon listeners, subscribers for giving us your questions. Wonderful again. Thank you to Todd and for Lissie for your great contributions today. And we are back next week with our budget recap with Adam Triggs from Mandala and Emma Dawson from the Chifley Institute. After that, I have no idea who our next guest is, but I do know because it's going to be the UK elections and we're getting John McTiernan back on. And I think David Feeney might be coming on as well to there might be a bit of mano debate about how to deal with what we assume is going to be a terrible election for the Labor Party, Scottish parliamentary elections, Welsh Assembly and local council in the UK. So, they're the shows coming up. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Lissie.
Thanks, Stephen.
And thank you, everyone else. See you next week.
What are we doing? What's going on? Hamnet, a movie about a boy who shows interest in theater dies. I actually really like that part.
Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like the show, then join our Patreon community for early and ad-free access to each episode. We regularly take questions and comments from our Patreon members, so get in there if you want to have your say. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.